All right, good evening, everyone. We're going to call tonight's meeting to order. In fact, we're going to call the Town Committee, Shelburne Committee of Adjustment meeting to order. As you can see, our mayor is not with us today. He's on a well-deserved vacation with his family, but he sends his greetings to all of you. So tonight we have a public meeting under Section 53, so I apologize, I'm going to be reading some essentials here. Under Section 53 of the Planning Act, to consider a minor variance application and a consent application. Minor variance application A19-/01 is for property located on the northeast corner of 30 Side Road, County Road 11, and Prentice Drive. The applicant is requesting relief from Section 5.133, definition of front lot line, and Section 3.15.9, parking requirements of the zoning bylaw 38-2007. Consent application B19/02 is the property located at 221 Owen Sound St. The purpose and effect of the application is to sever a portion of the property to have a land area of 300 square meters to create a new residential lot on the subject land. I will now ask the clerk for the mentioned notice of tonight's public meeting.
Notice of tonight's public meeting was advertised in local media sources May 2nd. Notice was also posted on the town's website, and property owners within a 60-meter radius have received notification.
So we will have a presentation by the town planner with a summary of the written comments received. Following this, there will be an opportunity for members of the public and council to ask questions or to provide comments. There's a sign-in sheet for each application being considered this evening. I'm sure it's available at some point at the front, okay? Okay, so when you do, if you plan to use the sign-in sheet, you obviously put your name, your contact information, so that the staff will have it available. Without further ado, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I do have a brief set of slides just to help illustrate the details of the application and the subject property. So the first application on the Committee of Adjustment agenda tonight is by Barlow Trail Investments, Inc., which is another name for Ice River Springs, who owns the adjoining property to the east. The application is for minor variance to seek relief from both the front lot line definition as well as the parking requirements of the zoning bylaw for the proposed development of a new water bottling facility on the property in the Shelburne Industrial Park. You can go to the next. Oh, I can do that. That's right. You can see the location of the property at the northeast corner of 30th Side Road and County Road 11, so on the east side of Prentice Drive in the Shelburne Industrial Park. The existing Ice River Springs facility is located to the east over on 30th Side Road, which is County Road 11, as well as Second Line, which is County Road 11 heading north. And then the KTH facility is a larger building located to the north. To the west is more vacant land in the industrial park, most of which has now been severed into separate lots for future development. Some of the lots to the west are subject to site plan approvals or applications in process. And then to the north, of course, is the balance of the town and the residential area along Franklin Street and Simon Street. So this is a high-level site plan that was submitted as part of the variance application. More detailed site plan application has since been received, but the purpose of tonight's meeting is at this point in time is just to consider the variance application. So the site development involves really three main components. The first is outlined in orange at the top of the slide. That's a proposed building for the water bottling facility. So that building would be about 100,000 square feet in size, or 9,500 square meters. So a pretty significant new building proposed for industrial development in the industrial park. The building would be located, according to this plan, in the northwest part of the site, closest to Prentice Drive, with a row of parking in front of the building. And there would be, you can see, is a little notch at the bottom left side of the building where there would be an office entrance. And then on the south side of the building are 15 loading spaces that are proposed. Those loading spaces would be facing out towards County Road 11, but would be screened from view from there by some landscaping and berming proposed to the south. So the first variance application, or the first variance requested as part of this application, is to seek relief from the definition of the front lot line, because the front lot line, as defined by the zoning bylaw, is the south lot line, the one on Prentice Side Road or County Road 11. And by virtue of that being the front lot line, that means the south yard in front of the building is deemed to be the front yard, and the bylaw requires that no loading spaces shall be provided in a front yard. So what this would do is basically redefine the front yard as the yard facing Prentice Drive, which is the longer street frontage and will function as the front of the building, to allow those loading spaces to be located to the south side of the building. The second purpose of the variance is to reduce the parking requirements. So for an industrial building of this size, for a broad range of uses, the bylaw would normally require 131 parking spaces. Based on conversations with the applicant, their current parking requirements at the water bottle recycling facility and typical requirements for water bottling plants, that's far in excess of what they need for their staff requirements. It's a large floor area. They will be hiring staff. They will be generating some employment as part of this facility in the range of 40, 50, and maybe up to 60 people, with future expansions as well. So they've identified a proposal for 60 parking spaces to accommodate the parking needs of the initial phase of this facility.
So if you don't mind, Steve, so if they do expand, then they would have to comply with the existing bylaw, yes?
Additional parking spaces would be required at the normal rate under the zoning bylaw.
Correct.
Or if the use of the building were changed, then a condition is recommended that then the normal parking requirements would change and additional spaces would have to be provided. So essentially the function of the variance is to create a parking standard unique to this site for a water bottling facility of this size.
Am I correct in saying that, I think they mentioned in the report that they have existing parking that's in the building that's currently there that is unused, and so in the event that if they were to grow, maybe they can make use of that parking that's unused?
They could. It wouldn't qualify as meeting the parking requirements of the zoning bylaw because the zoning bylaw requires the parking to be provided on the same property as the use that generates the need for the parking, but they do have a surplus of parking available there, and being under the same ownership, they would be allowed to do that. It's just an example, that's one example of how different industrial uses have different parking needs. Obviously, as a automotive plant, when that facility was originally built, it needed a lot more parking, had more staff per floor area than the water bottle recycling facility that's there now. Still has a high number of employees, but not as much as the original building. So essentially, this is allowing some flexibility to recognize certain uses don't require as much parking.
So Steve, currently they're going to hire 60 people, you said?
I can't remember the exact number for the initial hire, but this is basically a first phase of what could become a much larger building.
Yeah.
And so the initial phase of this building, I believe, was in the range of 30 to 40 people. But over the full build out of the site, they might get up to 60 people.
Yeah, because in your report it said there was going to be visitor parking as well.
Yeah, so initially it'll be more than enough for their staff and visitor needs. But if they add to the building, they'll have to add more parking, and they may get up to a level of 50 to 60 staff with the full build out, but with additional parking provided. And they could seek further variances in the future if the parking ratios of the bylaw require too much for the next additions. But the idea is we're always going to make sure there's enough parking there to satisfy the needs of the property. There really is no other parking arrangement for the site other than using the other property that they own. The parking on the street is restricted to 3 hours daily on one side. So street parking really isn't an option, and really can be avoided by making sure there's sufficient parking on the site. So this is just pointing out the fact that the west line along Prentice Drive would function as the front lot line according to the proposed variance. As mentioned in my report, there is no access to the property permitted from County Road 11, so the county is requiring all access from the local street. So that means that the two driveway entrances into the proposed parking and loading areas would be off of Prentice Drive and the access into the building as well, so that will function as the front lot line. Just to give you a bit of a closer view of the proposed layout of the site, again, this is an initial site plan, and a more detailed plan has since been received, but for purposes of illustrating some of the components for the variance, So this is turned the other way, so Prentice Drive is at the top, that's the west side. North is to the right-hand side. So you can see outlined in orange, the proposed building location, basically a square building for the water bottling facility. The parking on the side, that's for primarily like visitor parking coming in off of that driveway, and some staff parking. And then to the left side, you can see the proposed loading spaces being the longer lines along the south side of the building, as well as the smaller parking spaces adjacent a landscaped area that would be located to the south. In addition, they're proposing additional truck parking area that would be gravel, which is identified with that truck parking label. The green areas indicate what kind of landscaping is proposed initially to screen from view the loading spaces, as well as provide some visual screening of the parking areas, and a bit of a berm along the north edge of the property as well. So lots of landscaping around the building to make it more visually appealing. The application was circulated for comment in accordance with the Planning Act, and we received comments back from these departments and agencies. No comments or concerns from either the police service or the county building department. The county planning department did indicate that the property is partly within a source water protection area. We noted that as well, and we consulted with the NBCA about that. There's no concerns from a source water protection standpoint. As confirmed with the risk management official. The NBCA also provided their letter of clearance as of today for the variance application, which defers all of the future review of the drainage and stormwater management requirements of the site through to the town's site plan process. There is a small part of the site that's regulated by the Conservation Authority, but it relates to a wetland on the opposite side of County Road 11. So because of that, the NBC is advised they're not concerned with any wetland impacts associated with the site. So again, it will be strictly a town review process for the site plan. A couple of conditions are recommended for the variance. The first is just to request further information to confirm the amount of traffic and parking that will be required for the facility. Again, this is just to demonstrate that this will be sufficient parking for the site, from a qualified professional, that this is a typical standard for a water bottling facility, because the town zoning bylaw does not actually have a specific parking standard for that type of facility. What do other water bottling facilities of similar size provide in terms of parking, or how can the town be satisfied that that will be sufficient parking for the use? So a little bit more information requested there as a condition through the site plan process. The site plan process, again, it also addresses screening the loading areas and parking areas, as mentioned. So the variance wouldn't become final until site plan approval is granted. So that will come back through a further presentation to council. And then secondly, that minimum parking standard would only apply to this specific use, being a water bottling facility, and up to the maximum floor area identified at 9,500 square meters. So that's my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions. In addition, Christine Loft, the applicant's planner, is here as well. She's provided the planning report that's attached to my report in the council agenda. So if you have any questions of us, we're happy to answer.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. Any questions from members of council?
I guess the only one about is as far as the expansion of parking, if they need it, they've gone fairly far north in regards to what the site plan is. Got that there somewhere.
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
I went back. I wanted to check that.
So if expansion of parking areas are necessary, I suppose they could always expand further south, could they not?
They could, south or east.
Okay.
So what I didn't mention and should have mentioned is that the shape you see at the bottom right corner is a stormwater facility that will service the site. So that would be constructed with the first phase of development, but they've left the building and parking area sort of tucked into the northwest corner with the mind that they could expand easterly, both building and parking area on a similar ratio. And then that also leaves it potentially for a future second building on the south end of the site, room for that as well. So there's a lot more land area here than they initially need for the first phase.
Like that.
Councilor Brown?
Just a quick question, Steve. They could join the two properties since they're right beside each other?
They could be joined in ownership, yeah.
And then they could expand the parking lot from one to the
That's
other?
another way that the parking could be addressed if there's a shortage in future, is that would become one property and the parking would count for both facilities. Yeah.
Any other questions from members of the council? I have one, Steve. If everything goes through, when can we anticipate construction and completion of this project?
They do, they are in a rush. They want to try and get approval to start construction in the fall. They actually have some equipment that they're in the process of ordering, including some lines for the bottling process. So they are eager to get these approvals in place to allow that equipment to be delivered to a finished or partially finished building this fall.
Okay. Any members from the gallery, from the public, for our planner? Seeing no questions. Moved by Walter Bernardo, seconded by Linda Buffett. After considering the application, the committee is satisfied that the request is desirable for the appropriate and continued use of the subject property, maintains the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw and official plan, and is minor in nature. Accordingly, the committee resolves to grant the request. The minor variance is granted in accordance with the sketch plan provided to the committee and attached hereto. Application approved subject to the following conditions. One, that the owner shall obtain site plan approval from the town of Shelburne for the proposed development on the subject property, including submission of traffic and parking analysis to the satisfaction of the town. Secondly, and further, that a minimum parking requirement of 60 parking spaces shall only apply to a building having a maximum gross floor area of 9,500, is it? Square meters, and only for the use of the lot and building for a water bottling facility in accordance with an approved site plan. Parking spaces shall be provided in accordance with the zoning bylaw for any change of use of the lot and building of any floor area over 9,500 square meters. Dated Town of Shelburne, 27th of May 2019. Any further discussion on this? All in favor? Carried.
Okay, so for the second public meeting for the Committee of Adjustment this evening, another corner lot severance is proposed. This is similar to several other corner lot severances that have been reviewed by the committee in the past year or two. The subject property is owned by a number company, and the address is at 221 Owen Sound Street, which is the southeast corner of Owen Sound Street and 2nd Avenue. See the property location here. So it is in an existing residential neighborhood, but one block north of the downtown. The property does have one existing house on it. It's a little hard to see from this air photo, but the house is in the northwest corner of the property, closer to Owen Sound Street and 2nd Ave. Behind the house is an existing shed, and so parking within the 2nd Ave east right away. So it was identified through the application review that the current parking for the house is provided actually within the town's right-of-way. So as part of the application, they will be provided, required to provide parking for the existing house within the property, the town's right-of-way. So that's on the land to be retained. The existing house is proposed to be kept. And then to the east of that is the proposed severed lot, which would be a little bit smaller than the land that would be retained as the existing lot for the existing house. That property would have frontage from the south side of 2nd Ave, and the sanitary sewer connection would come in from the rear lane, which you can see on the east side of the property. Water service will have to be brought into this property either from Owen Sound Street, there's an existing water main on Owen Sound Street, and run along 2nd Avenue to the severed land, or from the west, from the east along William Street to the west. 2 years ago, a severance was granted for the property opposite, which is 220 William Street. So there is, similar to this property, there's a house fronting William Street that's been severed from the back portion of that lot, and you can see the white shed, that's where the new lot is located. So the severance will help facilitate the extension of the water service to both lots. The one that was severed previously off of 220 Williams, as well as the one proposed to be severed here from 221 Owen Sound Street. Just to give you a little bit broader view of the overall context, I think you're familiar with the location, but it's within an existing residential neighborhood downtown, just to the south. This property is within walking distance of the downtown. There are existing commercial and multi-unit residential to the east, including the existing plaza, the Foodland Plaza. So this is a good location for further intensification in terms of having walkable access to some day-to-day shopping and day-to-day needs, as well as the downtown. This is the severance sketch prepared by the surveyor on behalf of the applicant. So you can see the area outlined in green is the proposed lot to be retained with the existing house. That existing house does have some, it's an older home, and it does have some setbacks that are deficient of current zoning. It is recognized by existing legal non-compliance status, so although it doesn't meet current zoning, it was built well before the zoning law came into effect, so it is recognized. One of the conditions of the severance that's recommended is that the property is both the severed and retained rezoned, and as part of that rezoning, the retained lot would be subject to site-specific setbacks to recognize the existing conditions on the property. The red area identifies the proposed severed lot, 300 square meters, which is the minimum required by the R4 zone. So this is consistent with other severances that have been permitted in this area, as well as other established neighborhoods in town where we've allowed severances to that 300 square meter mark, and in some cases a little bit below that. Just one further note on the retained lot. The existing house is proposed to be converted to allow up to 3 dwellings with dwelling units within the existing house, so 3 apartments for rental purposes. So with that, they have to provide additional parking. So the parking would be provided roughly in the configuration shown there, with 3 spaces with a driveway provided off of the 2nd Avenue. Parking for the new dwelling, which you can see on the east side or right-hand side of the severed lot, would be a new double driveway off of the laneway. So 2 parking spaces for the proposed new dwelling and 3 for the existing. The application was circulated and we received comments back. The Director of Development Operations went out on site to make sure that there's sufficient fall in the sewer, based on where the sewer would have to be rerouted from the rear lane to the existing house, and also for the proposed new dwelling. And they confirmed that there is sufficient grade differential there to run a new sewer along 2nd Avenue for the existing house and to service the new proposed dwelling. There were no other comments or concerns from the Director of Development Operations. County Building Department didn't have any comments or concerns. Obviously, their review would be more at the building permit stage, both for the existing house, which is being converted, as well as the new dwelling proposed. The County Planning Department noted that the properties within a source water protection area. We consulted with the NBCA on that. It's just a low vulnerability aquifer, so there are no source protection concerns associated with this property. Obviously, it can be fully connected to municipal water and wastewater services, so there's no septic systems or other concerns. The NDCA provided their letter of clearance and confirmed no permits from the Conservation Authority are required. Hydro 1 just noted that there's some existing hydro lines overhead along the east and north boundaries of the property, and that all setbacks will be required to be maintained from those lines. The lines are basically right along the road frontages, so setbacks won't be an issue. They will have to make a request to Hydro 1 to actually do the hydro service to the house. Enbridge just confirmed that the applicant's responsibility to verify the existing gas service and to make sure that it doesn't encroach on the new property that's being created. So each property will have that independent gas services. So if it goes through the back portion of the property right now, it's going to have to be relocated to the existing house to stay off the Severed property. The school board just mentioned that education development charges apply to the severance, as do the town and county development charges. No concerns from the Dufferin Peel Catholic District School Board. And finally, the Township of Maitland indicated that they didn't have enough time to bring this to their council for response prior to tonight's meeting. So they will provide comments on the related zoning application, which will come back to council on June 10th for a further public meeting. So their comments should be available next week. I'm not anticipating any concerns from the township. They are circulated as part of these applications because all adjacent municipalities within 1 kilometer are required to be circulated. There are 6 conditions recommended. Most of these are the standard conditions. The consent agreement will require removal of the existing shed on the proposed severed lot. It will require prior to building permit of a lot servicing and grading plan, confirmation of the proposed driveway widths and locations, that parking requirements are met. Approval of a zoning bylaw amendment is required as well, so condition number 4 will be addressed further on June 10th when the zoning application comes forward to a public meeting. Survey reference plan will be required as a standard, and all conditions have to be satisfied within 1 year. So that's the extent of my presentation.
Right.
If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay, sorry. Could I just ask a question before you do, Mr. Acting Mayor? To Steve, regarding the Cashland Middle Parkland, is that based on what it will be as R4 zoning or on the current zoning in the severance?
It's based on the day of provisional consent. So it would be based on current zoning, but whether it's residential R2 or R4, either allows a single attached dwelling to be built in the area. So it would be a similar valuation. And the town will get 5% of the value of the severed lot.
With it being more units, so would it not have a higher value?
It's based on the severed lot, and the severed lot is the one to the east, which will only have 1 house on it. The retained lot is the one that will have the 3 units in the existing house.
So they don't plan on converting the severed lot with the 1 unit into 2? They're putting 2 parking spaces.
They haven't identified any requests to do that. Under the zoning bylaws, they would be permitted to add 1 more unit to that, subject to providing the 2 parking spaces, which they are showing. So that could be done simply with a building permit. And there's no development charges or extra cash in lieu of parking for that. That's under the act. The 3rd unit in the existing house is subject to rezoning because you can only have 2 as of right. And to have the 3rd, you require special zoning.
Right.
Any other questions from members of the council? Steve, did you say that the existing parking for that the current house that's on the lot has 2 parking spaces along 2nd Avenue?
Yeah, it's sort of, so it comes in off.
Because I went there yesterday, and that's where, it seems to me that's where it is. And
Yeah.
I heard you correctly, I think you're saying that as a part of this condition, they may have to enlarge that area to have a 3rd spot?
No, so
No?
they'll have to locate the parking on the actual property. It's really hard to see there, but you can see the space between the top red line and the edge of the pavement on 2nd Avenue. Within that space, they currently have a couple of parking spaces parallel to the road. So you come in and you make a sharp turn and you park in the grass area.
We own that as the town, do we not?
Yeah, so as a
Parking
requirement
lot,
of this, they'll be required to restore the boulevard to grass.
I see.
And then locate the 3 parking spaces they require on the actual property,
Yeah.
not on the right of
So
way.
create a driveway and then.
Yeah, which is I think what they're doing up the laneway, right? Well, just where the new severed line is going to be.
So yeah, on
Okay.
the other house, they'll have a double wide driveway beside the house, again, entirely on the private property for parking. But it will have a new driveway entrance off of the Maitland.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions from members of council? Any questions from the gallery, members of the public for our planner? Sir.
There's 5 people currently renting the first unit, which have 2 vehicles, and he wants to put in a 3rd rental unit. I can't see where the parking is going to come from just for that house, let alone, never mind the severed lot. Because currently the same owner who owns William and the other severed lot behind it, there's about 4 vehicles parked there plus a snowmobile, basically on the yard. Like, it's a makeshift driveway, it's not like a proper, so.
So the parking requirement under the zoning bylaw is 1 space per unit, so they would meet that. That's the same for any house in town. There are restrictions on where you can locate those spaces. They have to be on the property, number 1, but they can't be in the required front yard. So the first 6 meters off of Owen Sound Street. In this case, they'd be located in the rear yard. Through the development agreement, they'll be required to maintain that parking area, and I wasn't aware that the parking on 220 William as well, technically they shouldn't be, because there's no parking except in conjunction with your dwelling. And storage of vehicles isn't permitted on that property, so I can follow up with the applicant on that point. That is owned by, not specifically by this applicant, by a relative of that applicant, so I'm not sure if the 2 issues are related or not. But the 3 parking spaces, although it may not be satisfactory for current tenants, is the zoning minimum. What we could put in the consent agreement is maybe a stipulation that all lease agreements and purchase and sale agreements have to stipulate that the lease agreement specifies the number of parking spaces available to the tenant. So it's 1 per unit, so that they're aware going in that they have 1 parking space with their unit. That's one technique that could be looked at.
Is the applicant local? And it says a numbered company that doesn't...
Yeah, so it's actually Sandy Brown, the mayor of Orangeville, is the owner of that numbered company.
Council Fiddle.
So if there's an issue with the property, is that not a bylaw issue?
Yes.
And should it not, it's complaint driven? If there's something on those properties that the neighbors have an issue with, they can make a complaint to the town anonymously in written format?
Correct.
Chapter?
Correct.
If everything goes through, how long could the neighbors expect or endure construction on this property? Like, how long from start to finish would one expect this to be completed?
I don't know how long the applicant expects to finish the renovations on the existing house. I haven't obtained that timeline from them. I'm not sure if the applicant intends to be the one to build the house on the new lot, or to sell it to somebody else to build. But in either case, it's usually in the best interest of the builder to try and, do that within, sort of a 6 to 8 month time frame at the outside timeline, depending on weather and other things. So,
okay.
Potentially there could be construction ongoing there, on and off for, a year or 2, depending on how long it takes him to finish his renovations there, how long his building permits stay valid, how long it takes between starting and finishing the existing or the new house on the separate lot. There are time limits, I believe, to a building permit.
A year?
I think it's 1 year. Yeah. So if it does go idle, then there's some enforcement that could take place there.
Okay. All right. Seeing no further questions, moved by Walter Bonato, seconded by Linda Buffett. After considering the application, the committee is satisfied with allowing this consent for the purpose of severing 300 square meters from the original 666 square meters. The committee, having regard to those matters under subsection 5124 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, CP 13 as amended, resolves to grant provisional consent subject to the following conditions being fulfilled. Number 1, the Secretary Treasurer's certificate under subsection 5342 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, as amended shall be issued and the Secretary Treasurer's fee be paid. The payment of cash in lieu of parkland at the rate of 5% of the value of the newly created lot. Number 3, that the owner enter into agreement with the town addressing the site servicing drainage and parking requirements and the details of all servicing connections, modifications, and improvements to existing services, including sanitary sewers, water supply, storm sewers, roads, sidewalks, hydrants, utilities, and any required easements deemed necessary by the town in accordance with town standards and to the satisfaction of the town's Director of Development and Operations and the town's engineer. The requirement to remove the existing shed and to construct a new driveway and parking spaces required in accordance to zoning bylaw on the retained lot and the payment of required fees. Number 4, the owner obtain approval of zoning bylaw amendment for the 2 resulting lots to zone that will accommodate the proposed lot areas, yards, and setbacks. Approval of the draft reference plan as applicable shall be obtained at the Committee of Adjustment Office, Town of Shelburne, and the required number of prints, being 3 of the resultant deposited reference plan shall be received. And lastly, the conditions are to be fulfilled and the consent to be finalized on or before 1 year from the date of the issuance of the committee's notice of decision. Application approved on condition as stated. Any further discussion on this? All in favor? So we got one opposed? Okay, one opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Thank you. In the event that I didn't mention, if we got one opposed, the motion is carried. Opposed. All right. All right, so we're going to call to order the council meeting for this evening. Let's start off with disclosure of any pecuniary interest. Anyone? And if anyone, I'm looking at Walter smiling at me. All right. If anyone does, please submit that in writing to the clerk. Number 3 on the agenda is the adoption of minutes. The council minutes of May 13, 2019. I'm assuming everybody's had a chance to review the minutes. Are there any items in the minutes that were circulated that any member of council would like to speak to? No? Okay, so I'll entertain the motion. Be it resolved that the minutes from the regular council meeting held May 13, 2019 be approved as presented and circulated. Could I have a mover on that? Councilor Bonato, Councilor Fegan. Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay. That takes us to item number 4 on the agenda, public question period. Any members from the public? Or questions rather from the public? Alex?
Hi there, I'm Alex McClellan, the Shelburne Freelancer and also resident, 375 Jelly Street South.
Thank you.
In light of recent inquiries I've received in regards to OPP versus Shelburne Police Services decision that's upcoming, I would like it stated for the public record, if council will be looking at making the decision, exercising transparency in a public forum, enabling the public to see which councillors voted pro or against, or will the decision be made in closed session, followed up with public announcement?
So I can assure you that the decision regarding the issue that you're speaking of will be made in a public forum. A decision of this magnitude will not be made in closed session, I can assure you of that. And so there are a number of meetings that are scheduled for this to occur. I think we have a meeting, special meeting coming up on the 3rd. We have, which is the consultant report. We have a meeting coming up on June 10th, which is staff is going to be reporting back to council with respect to the motion that was brought by the mayor and approved by council regarding police accommodation up to the $3 million limit, as you're well aware of. And I believe on the 24th, June 24th, staff will come back with a report on recommendations with respect to policing. Again, that will be open to the public. And at that point in time, council as a whole will have the opportunity to make a final decision at that point in time if council so chooses. And if not, council, I believe, has the discretion to defer that decision until
The July meeting or call another special meeting?
or call another special meeting, exactly. So I point out all those dates to demonstrate that these are all public meetings, whether they're special or otherwise, or regularly scheduled meetings. The public will continue to have the opportunity to ask questions, to hear the issues, and to hear council's responses to questions that they have. And again, when it comes to this important decision, you can rest assured that it will be made in a public forum.
So we will actually get to see everybody take a vote.
Well, if there's a call for that, for individuals to identify how they voted on the issue, then absolutely. Councilor Buffett?
Just having said that, I would myself be asking for a recorded vote on each item related to the police. So that would mean that anybody in the public, when they're reading anything or reviewing everything, will see exactly who voted for or against any motion.
I think it would be in the spirit of transparency for the public to see it happen.
It will be in a public meeting done by, doesn't matter if it's a recorded vote or not, all meetings are public. And it doesn't fall under anything that should go in camera. There are specifications for going in camera, and the public will see each councillor vote. And like I said, it won't matter whether it's a recorded vote or not, they will see each councillor vote. So it will be done in a public meeting.
Our town clerk wants to make a few comments on that as well.
I just would like to clarify that the Municipal Act does not permit council to pass resolutions or motions in closed session. It's not permitted.
Great. Good, thank you.
And then just to you talked about the recorded vote, that was done during the Fiddle Park as well. So this is nothing new, and we'll be following the same protocol if necessary. Any further questions from the public?
Regarding that?
Yeah, regarding Fiddle Park. So,
No, I'm saying, are you finished with your question?
yeah,
Alex?
I guess.
No, if you have an additional question, please go ahead.
Well, it seemed like we had a Fiddle Park fiasco. So I was just hoping to avoid that with the transparency question. I'd love to videotape that vote. Yay or nay, I just would love to see it on video for all to witness.
Well, again,
with their eyes.
It's been identified that these meetings are open to the public. If a recorded vote is called, you will have the opportunity, along with everyone else, to see. I only referenced Fiddle Park not to suggest that it was a fiasco, but to show that a recorded vote was taken there, and that one, if called upon here, will be done as well.
I think it just gets a little wordy sometimes when people say a recorded vote was recorded, but I'm wanting to clarify the visual aspect. I understand what you're saying. It's a recorded vote, and that's open to the public, and people can read it. Is that what you're saying?
No, the recorded vote will be done in a public forum. So everyone here, including yourself, if you choose to attend the meeting when the recorded vote is called, you'll be able to see for yourself exactly who has voted either in favor or against.
That's what I wanted to hear, those exact words.
Yes, you will have the opportunity to see yourself with your own eyes, as everyone else in this room, if they so choose to.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Just being a little ignorant, don't know whether or not the extension of the Legion is on your agenda for one.
Ma'am, first of all, if you don't mind, state your name, please.
Lisa Pete, Shelburne Legion.
Thank you.
Sorry.
It's okay.
That would be the one question. The other question is that it was brought to council a couple of years ago regarding the front corner being the southwest corner of the Legion's property, that a couple of years back we asked if we could fill it full of cement or whatever, pave it, because it seems to be a throughway for all the people that live behind us and all the students going to the school. It was told to us at that point that it was a green space. I can show you photographs right now, but it's not a green space, it's a mud space.
Okay, so I'm just told by the clerk that there is a staff report coming on that.
Okay.
So that will be addressed in the near future.
Okay, and about the first part, the extension?
There is a motion, there are two motions referring to that later on. It's not on the agenda, but there are two motions referring to that later on that I've brought forward.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other questions? So that closes question period. Okay, we're on to presentations. We have a proclamation to be read. I believe the mayor was approached by Pamela Facility, who is the interim CEO for Parachute National Charity, to help bring awareness to Safe Kids Week And so with that, proclamation was provided, and I'll read that out. Thank you. So it reads, whereas Parachute Canada's theme for Safe Kids Week 2019 is preventing harm from children's fall in the home and at play, and whereas preventing harmful child falls in the home and at play is important, falls are the leading cause of injury to Canadian children. While most child falls do not result in death, each year more than 140,000 children are seen in emergency departments for fall-related injuries. Most of these injuries to children under 5 occur in the home. Whereas Safe Kids Week is a week dedicated to raising awareness and seeking solutions to preventable child fatalities and serious injuries across Canada, everyone has a role to play in creating change among their peers, in classrooms, and in their communities. Therefore, the Council of the Town of Shelburne hereby proclaims June 3rd to June 9th, 2019 as Parachute Safe Kids Week in the Town of Shelburne. Okay, we have a presentation from the Upper Grand District School Board. Is Jennifer Benoit?
Jennifer,
somebody?
they're both here.
Yeah, just maybe grab them.
She is definitely part of that statistic. Last week it was twice. She's a big bruise on her cheek. She just got some bruise off her head.
So we have Jennifer Passy, am I pronouncing that correctly?
That's correct.
And Trustee Lynn Toppy.
Yes, I'm also joined this evening by the Chair of the Board, Linda Busuttil, and Superintendent of Education, Carlo Zenrick.
Okay, you're presenting alone?
I am.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. So first off, I wanted to thank you very much. It's been a year since I was initially going to attend and present to Council, but you have had a very busy year as of late. And we have now had the opportunity to go back as we will be on a go-forward basis and review our plan as part of an annual review cycle. So it's quite timely to be here this evening. So just to start a little bit of the background. So the board's long-term accommodation plan, which I will start calling LTAP on a go-forward, was completed during our 2017-18 school year. It was and is a strategic review of the board's facilities, our enrollment, and our population projections for each of our communities that we work within. The jurisdiction of the Upper Grand covers 16 lower tier municipalities in Guelph, Wellington, and Dufferin, as well as 2 county jurisdictions. And the overall overarching priority of the plan is to align the board's school facilities with the needs of the board and communities that we serve. So as I noted, we've just recently completed the annual review of the long-term plan. Some of the priorities that we had identified in the work plan, which is divided into 5-year and 10-year work plan priorities, have not yet started due to some ministry delays, but the plan did look at providing updated enrollments for the current 2018-2019 school year, as well as projected enrollments for 2019-20. So we've updated the accommodation priorities as well, based on the information that we collected over the last year, and like I said, some of those ministry changes. And we've provided some further information with regards to some board-wide priorities. The board's annual review replaces a process that we had typically engaged in each spring anyway, which was called our Identified Schools Report. And that report goes through and assesses our current and forecasted enrollments, compares that to the capacity of our schools, and we use a term called utilization, which looks at a relationship between those two pieces of information to kind of gauge whether our schools are over capacity or underutilized, or whether they're sitting in a nice sweet spot between 80 and 110% utilization. We use that to inform things in terms of future processes that might be necessary, but we also use it as part of our community planning and partnerships policy. That is a part of a response to ministry guidelines on community planning and partnerships. So anytime that the board has surplus capacity or is looking at new build projects, we engage with our municipal stakeholders and a very extensive list of other potential public partners and our communities around whether or not there's opportunity to use surplus space in the board's schools or to partner with us on build projects. So on a board-wide basis, the report provided updated enrollment projections, and in 2018-19, the board's elementary enrollment was sitting just shy of 24,000 students, which was up about 400 students across the board. Secondary enrollment was sitting at approximately 11,300 students, again with a slight increase experienced year over year. And that is consistently sort of part of our trend on a go-forward basis, looking at an enrollment growth rate of about 1 to 2%. There are no real significant changes in the 5 or 10-year projects that we have planned. The annual review is our opportunity to sort of check in and see whether or not our projections and the reality are matching up. And it is the intent of the board to do a more robust 5-year review, which would be somewhat consistent to a review cycle that you might undertake as a municipality for such things as official plans. So overall, across the district, our elementary facilities are well utilized, with about 90% utilization, and in secondary about 97% utilization, which compares to the Shelburne review area with an elementary utilization rate of approximately 96%, and the Dufferin-Orangeville secondary review area has a utilization rate of about 98%. That doesn't mean that every school sits at that level. It means that we still have schools where we have surplus, so we have about 2,000 empty spaces in our elementary schools across the jurisdiction, but we also have a shortfall in the longer term forecast of over 1,000 elementary pupil places across the district. So the work plan priorities were identified in this manner in the original report and updated in March. In 2018-19, there was a few things that we've been able to check off our list. The board undertook a secondary program review in the fall. We worked with one of our elementary schools in Guelph to determine whether or not its enrollment was going to increase to include grades 7 and 8. It was grades JK to 6 at the time. And we have an ongoing study right now looking at the feasibility of offering international baccalaureate programming in the Orangeville-Dufferin-Erin area. And once that feasibility study is concluded, it will be either determined that it is feasible or not, and will form part of future work looking at the opportunity to offer French immersion secondary programming in Orangeville and Dufferin as well. As I've noted, there's a couple of things that were delayed from our 2018-19 priorities due to ministry changes. So like you, we have also had a few things come down the pipe in the last year which have changed some of our work plan abilities. We have not, since August of 2017, had the opportunity to apply for capital. I'm going to stop there for just 1 second. The board has the ability to collect monies through education development charges in order to pay for land if we are acquiring a parcel to build a new school. But any capital for a new build or for an addition is at the whim. I won't say, okay, I said whim. is based on application and evaluation of our board's priorities amongst 71 other boards in the province. So we have not had a window open since, like I said, August of 2017. We don't know when the next opportunity is going to come to us. We're hopeful that it might be soon, but the priorities to apply again for capital for additions specifically in this community have not come about. And as such, we haven't been able to proceed with that, but identify that as a priority should the opportunity be presented in the next year. We also have a couple of board policies that can't be reviewed and move forward either, and they're to do with that community planning and partnership piece that I spoke about earlier, but also the policy that would allow the board, should it need to deal with school closures or significant reallocation of grades or programs. That pupil accommodation review guideline is something that we've been waiting for again for the last year in order to be able to update our own policies.
So Jennifer, if I can stop you, what happens if you do not get any grants in the next while due to whatever, and you have an overloaded school? You redo the boundaries and push them to another community, or what do you do?
To Mr. Chair, the board has a few tools in its toolbox. Portable accommodation is always something that we have available to us, and we do generally manage our enrollment with that as best as we can, but there could be a time where we do exceed the capacity of portables on our school sites, and in that case we have a number of developments in this community and throughout the district that we refer to as development areas. So they don't form part of a permanent school boundary at this point. That gives the board flexibility to reassign those where there might be capacity available in other schools. And then we always have a boundary review opportunity as well. So we would look at reorienting school boundaries in order to shift the enrollment, again, where the capacity exists. But looking around at available schools, there are limitations in how far we can go and how much disruption we would want to create if that was the alternative.
Can I just ask a question? I know historically, whenever there's an application that goes forward and for comments, it goes to the school board for any development proposals that come forward. Is there ever an opportunity for you to say no, so that the province will have to do something?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is an option. It's one that boards have attempted to exercise. We have not had the practice where we have made development approvals conditional, or development approval registration conditional on the boards being able to accommodate the enrollment. It has been challenged in court to various levels of success, but generally not very successful. That would be an alternative. So it's not something that we as a general practice employ. It does create some challenges, but through those other methods, we would be hopeful that we could address the constraint that we're faced with, if that were the case. So we did speak about this briefly. Again, we did identify in the original long-term accommodation plan 2 additions in this community at Highland and at Glenbrook. Both were looking at 4-room additions. The ministry had identified to us that due to lack of immediate need, it wasn't a priority for them to fund. And again, we haven't had an opportunity to reapply. But when and if there's an opportunity in the coming months, that will again be reviewed by the board.
How often do they give you those opportunities? When you say in the coming months, is it once a year?
Through you. In general, it has been once a year, but as I said, we haven't had that opportunity since August of 2017. So it has been an extraordinary long period of time at this point. But in general, there has been over the last 6 or 7 years at least 1 opportunity a year, depending on the nature of the project. The previous government was allowing 2 windows to address other consolidation or other matters that were a priority to that government, but at this point in time, we don't know when the window might reopen.
Just so the community, I guess, is aware, I know I've encountered this question quite a few times myself as to why Glenbrook was not built large enough to accommodate, you know, the future growth that was going to happen on that side of town. Is there any way to sort of let people know like why we would have to now be looking at a renovation or an addition?
There are a couple of reasons for that, and one is that some of the growth that's being considered, or some of the growth that is underway now was not on the books at the time that that school planning was underway. The expansion, we talk about using portables for interim accommodation. The board is always very cautious as well not to overbuild. And so we don't generally build to a peak enrollment, we build to a longer term sustainable enrollment. To be respectful and responsible with the tax dollars that are being contributed to the construction of those schools.
Excellent, thank you.
I'm not sure for the gallery that this is going to be very legible for you. This is just one of the charts that comes out of the long-term accommodation plan showing the review area. So our jurisdiction is broken up into smaller geographies. This table represents the schools in the county of Dufferin generally, elementary schools. And what we have presented is the enrollment last year, current year, and next year, as well as 5 and 10-year projections. And we've compared that to the capacity of the schools. So that's a ministry rating of how many students would be accommodated in a facility. And the percentages that are shown towards the right-hand side and shaded in different colors are representing that utilization rate that I spoke about earlier. The color coding is underutilized schools are less than 80% and they're in blue. Well utilized is between 80 and 110% and they're noted in green. And overcrowded schools are 110% or higher and they're noted in red. I will note for your information that this is strictly enrollment to the bricks and mortar capacity of the building. It does not reflect the fact that portable accommodations are on a number of these school sites, and so that's how we're meeting that need currently. But you will see that there are a number of schools that are red today and will be red into the future. And again, as Councillor Bonotto noted, there are, and my response indicated, there are different ways of responding to some of these circumstances. You may recall that there was a redrawing of boundaries between Centennial Highlands and Primrose. That was in anticipation of receiving French immersion at Centennial Highlands, and also recognizing that there was future growth within this area that could be accommodated in that school and make better use of Primrose. So those are some of the balances that we've been working towards over the last couple of years.
I really hope you get a lot of grants because in 2027 you're going to have a lot of troubles.
Well, that would be the boundary thing again, maybe with Glenbrook and Highland Heights.
No, in 2027 it's
Yeah.
most everything is
Well,
red.
yeah, well, everything, yeah. I mean, everything at that point, you're exactly right, yeah.
And on the secondary side, again, it's the same sort of information. Capacity to enrollment gives us our utilization percentages. High schools are a little more unique. In elementary schools, when we are making a business case to the ministry's typically looking, if they were to grant us monies for a new school, as an example, of having that new building nearly 80% full. That's sort of the expectation. We have to have almost 80% of the kids sitting in other schools in order to justify the new build. In the secondary side of things, it's a little bit different in that any new capacity, any new capital has to come with a business case that's already looked at. How do we maximize the use of the programming of the space through timetabling? So that may mean going to a double or a triple lunch before a high school could be demonstrated to have sufficient need to have additional capacity either added or a new school built. So it's a different threshold that we have to meet on the secondary side, and one that's a little bit more difficult.
So if you stop right there. Center Dufferin, which is one of the reasons we asked for you to come up last year, because we didn't notice anything on it in the way of expansion or growth or anything, and we knew it's well utilized and will be even better utilized by the looks of things in the near future. No ministry dollars there either, I gather.
Through you. No, there isn't. And what we have to sort of be cognizant of is some of the pictures. So when we look back, and it hasn't been in recent years, but between 1998 and 2009, Senator Dufferin consistently sat close to 1,000 students in enrollment. It hasn't had that experience in recent years, and this community's not had that experience. Certainly those new to the community hadn't had that experience. But when we look back and we look at the ability of the school, that would be consistent with how the school has operated not that long ago. We recognize that there can be concerns about higher levels of enrollment, but with higher levels of enrollment also come more opportunities. There's more opportunities for potentially more diverse courses being offered, less stacking of classes, as right now a lot of the course offerings are being combined between 2 grades in order to make sure that subject of instruction is available to the students who are desiring it. So there is some benefit that comes along with it. If there are specific questions around secondary and timetabling and some of the capacity questions, Superintendent Zen is the superintendent for Senator Dufferin as well and would be available to answer those. I do realize that, as you pointed out, that the secondary questions were some of the things that were being raised in the community a year ago. There was concerns about the numbers of lockers as an example, and I had spoken with the principal a year ago and spoke with her again last week and was assured that there are more than enough lockers right now for the number of students currently in the school. Any students who are sharing lockers, she's not sure where that rumor was emanating from. She's heard questions about whether the school is crowded, and her perception is that it's not, that it's a bustling school and is functioning very well, and would compare it to any of our schools in terms of the vibrancy and positivity of what's happening in that building today.
Unfortunately, that's not what we're hearing. We're hearing somewhat opposite to that. And in general, in the public, and some of the concerns that raised up there is due also to the ratio of diversification that's in the community and the crowding.
Right.
So we're just hearing somewhat a little differently than maybe what you're hearing.
Sure. I just want to leave just one last detail. We don't know where this is going yet. You may have heard about the changes to the average class size funding in secondary changing. We've been told that there are going to be changes to the loadings of those classrooms as well from the capacity perspective. We don't know what it's going to be, and we don't know when we're going to hear. So you'll note that the current capacity of Senator Dufferin is 798 pupil places. We're expecting it's not going to be 798 pupil places soon. We don't know what the number is going to be, but again, when we speak about the capital side of things, to kind of circle back to that, it may be a little more difficult than it already is to make any case for any capital that would go along with the growth at this point in time. If the capacity were to increase, and as I said, there's those other things that the ministry looks to us to resolve first, it may be a little tough for us to make any business cases coming forward. So that's the end of my presentation this evening.
Thank you. Any other questions from members of council?
One more. On the board, I guess, won't know where it goes as well with the online education that the ministry is proposing for the upper high school students.
I'm going to defer to Superintendent Zen on that.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. At this point, what the ministry described the e-learning is sort of a vision that they have. And they're in the process of consulting board. So that's happening in the next couple of months. So I think it'll be some time before we have any sense of what that e-learning will look like, and if it's going to look like what was announced, or if it was going to look something totally different. So we're in the very beginning stages of the e-learning discussion.
Yeah, because the issue up here, of course, is broadband and the ability to even download or whatnot. And again, that may end up being something that has to be offered at the high school. Because where else would you go to get it?
And we've already had internal discussions about what would be the ramifications if we had to provide that, not to mention the infrastructure within the actual school.
Yeah.
And where the students would actually go and how they would be supervised. So there's lots of questions around how that would actually look on the ground if it happened the way it was announced.
Yeah, I can see the problems.
If no further questions, I entertain the motion. Be it resolved that council receives the presentation from the Upper Grand District School Board as presented. Could I have a mover? Councilor Bernardo, Councilor Hall. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you for the opportunity. We enjoy working with your staff and yourselves around the horseshoe, and look forward to continuing that relationship.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So we have no deputations. So we'll just move on to council inquiries. Do we have any?
I have two motions that I brought over.
I think that should be later on in the
Is that later on?
Under item number 7,
Yeah,
council.
there was a motion. Yes.
I just put that on my agenda.
So any other council inquiries? I do have one of the clerk. We had previously discussed at one of our meetings that either council or staff would be willing to go to some of our long-term facilities to help facilitate the participation in the recent survey that we had. I was just wondering if you could provide us with an update as to where we are with respect to that.
I have reached out to both facilities. One facility is under an influenza lockdown, and the other facility, unfortunately, their staff could not accommodate our attendance at their on site. I did try, I did reach out to no avail. Could not move it forward.
Okay, thank you. No other inquiries? Okay, we're good. All right, that takes us to our consent agenda. We have 3 items. Before I read the motion, does any member of council have any item in the consent agenda that they wish to speak to? No? The only question that I have regarding item number 2 on the consent agenda is with respect to the painting of the parking lines. Now, that may seem like an easy solution, but I'm wondering whether or not Public Works should be involved in that, or there should be further discussion with respect to doing that. My understanding right now they're unmarked, or the area in question may be unmarked. Jennifer, you can maybe shed some light on that?
Right now it's a gravel area, and so painting parking lines would probably be a futile exercise. That would be consistently repetitive. Understanding the soccer club is willing to donate the items, but I'm not sure it would be a worthy exercise for them to do on a continual basis. There are parking bollards, parking curbs that delineate spots. It is the potential in the future is for that parking lot to be paved, but I believe it has to be covered through development charges. I'm not sure we're there yet to pay for that.
So I guess the question for council is whether we remove this for further discussion, or any comments?
If you receive the item, that means no action is to be taken.
Yeah. In all honesty, I have to agree with the clerk. To paint it, you just, to do anything there, you just wash it away within a short period of time. Every rain, you have to go out, redo it. Or even as vehicles drive, it'll just disappear under the gravel. If it was paved, I could see it would make sense. refer to Public Works for comment too. That would be it. We can refer to Public Works for comment.
Well, I was thinking that was my view. I mean, again, it may seem like a simple solution, but I thought that Public Works should at least have some input into whether that would be appropriate or not, and certainly heard the comments by our clerk. But I've been advised, of course, that that's one thing we could do. We could refer it to Public Works, but the instruction here is that if we receive it, then we're not really taking any further action on it. So that's an option that we have.
I'll agree that item number 2 be removed and referred to Public Works.
Okay, so we just get your signature on that, let's draft that.
And you didn't want any more motions.
I tried my best, Walter, believe me. We have a motion moved by Walter Bernardo, seconded by, Councillor Walter Bernardo, and seconded by Councillor Linda Buffett. Be it resolved that item number 2 be removed from the consent agenda and referred to Public Works for future comment. Further comment. Thank you. Any other discussion on this? All in favor? All right, that's carried. Thank you. So with that amendment, be it resolved that Council receives now item 1 and 3 under 6.08 consent agenda as presented and circulated. Have a mover, please. By Councillor Fegan, second by Councillor Wagner. Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Okay, next we have a report from planner Steve. Thanks.
Okay, so this report is specifically regarding a site alteration permit application that was made in conjunction with the minor variance application for the Barlow Trail Investments or Ice River Springs proposal. I didn't bring any additional slides or graphics for it because you've seen the nature of the proposed development. This is not a site plan application tonight. This is a site alteration permit under the site alteration bylaw. Basically, it's an early request prior to site plan approval to allow the owner to start some preliminary earthworks. So grading of the site, putting in erosion and sediment controls, and starting the stormwater management pond. So the final details of that, final designs, the parking areas, and all of those things will still be vetted through the site plan process. This is just to allow them to get some equipment on site to start removing some of the surface vegetation, to start the early grading and that stormwater pond. There are securities required as part of the permit, and there's a series of conditions recommended. Basically what the securities would allow is if for some reason the site plan application did not move forward or things weren't done to the town's satisfaction, the town would hold enough money to allow it to restore the site to what it looks like today. Basically seeded, flat and draining properly, so that there's no legacy issues left over. But the intent is that the site plan application would deal with the further details. There would be an agreement with the town on the development of the site to its full extent. and specifically for phase 1. And the site alteration permit would just be an earlier start to some of the initial works. We have consulted and circulated that to the county and other agencies. As I noted before, the Conservation Authority did agree to allow that permit just to move forward under the town process. There's no separate permits required by the Conservation Authority. The county just had some comments about the location of the access and the drainage outlet from the stormwater pond to the county ditch. So basically, the first is that no construction access to the site from the county road. It'll all be from Prentice Drive. There will be a mud mat and dust control required. The conditions also require that they clean the street if they drag any mud into the roadway. And the town would obviously be monitoring that. There's a deposit required whereby they'd be paying the town's cost for doing that monitoring. So the engineering consultants, they have to go on site if they have to check in on things, which they do, for various developments throughout the town, that would be covered from that deposit. And then that doesn't obviously prejudice any of the outcomes that could result from the review of the site plan process. So the final condition is just that that is still a process that they're responsible for, that they have to file a complete application and pay the appropriate fees and enter into an agreement with the town on the site plan process to do the full development, including the building, parking areas, and other site works. So at this point, we're just asking for Council's authorization to allow staff to issue the permit when all the final details of the site alterations are confirmed. We have received the required information and drawings for the site alteration. It's just that there were some technical engineering review comments on those that required some further response. So we have received that response back from the applicant's engineers. We're just awaiting the town's engineer's final review of that response, as well as confirmation of the deposit requirement for the site alterations. So there's a little bit more detail to that in my report, but that's an overview, and if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Thank you, Steve. On page 3 of your report, item number 10, we're talking about, at least the report is speaking to the trucking along the haul route to be limited to hours of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Is that normal? It seems quite long.
That's the hours of work permitted by the noise bylaw and what we've included in other site alteration permits. Now, that's in there really as a contingency in case they happen to need significant fill to be brought into the site. Based on the work or the information we've received so far, the site's already pretty much at grade, so they don't need to bring a lot of fill into the site. They need to balance a little bit north and south. There's a lower part and a higher part, and they need to balance it out a little bit. But the other thing is, if they do have some fill to be bringing onto the site, there's still some excess fill on the KTH property. So there's some like really right behind this property that would be easier to access rather than having any hauling along the roadways. So other than some granulars and gravel for a base for the building and for the parking areas, we don't expect very much hauling to this property. But that provision is in there just in case there is hauling.
Councilor Bernard?
Dust control, my favorite subject. Because there is houses across the Besley Drain, and the last thing, if the wind picks up at any point from the south and drives it towards the north, you don't want it to go towards those houses, right?
Right.
So dust control, I tried to go through it and I couldn't see dust control. I saw dirt control, but not dust, mud control, but not dust control.
Okay. We can make sure that word is specifically in the conditions, but we're just checking that.
The way the winds have been blowing this last few months, the last thing you need is to have somebody in the housing area make a complaint. That's all I'm concerned about, is any dust getting blown to the north to the housing.
Yeah, we can put dust controls in the conditions of the permit.
Yeah. And hopefully it doesn't happen, but it's always, anything can happen.
Okay, any other questions from council? I'll read the motion. Be it resolved that council receives report P2019-13 from the town planner as presented and circulated, and that council authorizes staff to finalize the site alteration permit subject to the applicant satisfying town engineering review comments and subject to the conditions noted within the report P2019-13 and other such conditions as may be required by the town engineer. Could I have a mover on that? Councilor Bernardo, Councilor Hall. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have item number 2, another report. This is FS 201908 from the treasurer and associated presentation from the GIS Coordinator regarding the strategic assets management policy.
Thank you, Mayor. In 2008, municipalities were introduced to public sector accounting, which is something that we used to have to report on. But what it required for us was to record and track and manage all of our capital assets and infrastructure. Municipal staff across the province, and especially in smaller municipalities like Shelburne, struggled with this exercise, both financially and because of lack of dedicated staff to approach this project. We did purchase software in 2012 to track the assets financially, but up until that point there had been many portions of the software that were quite underutilized just because we didn't have the dedicated staff and the time to learn how to use the software. In 2017, Ontario Regulation 58817 was passed, which set out another list of requirements that municipalities had to come into compliance with. And it was at that point that staff recognized that we needed help. So for the 2018 budget, senior staff recommended to council that we hire a dedicated GIS coordinator. And tonight we have Chad with us, who we have hired, and we'll be looking after our capital and infrastructure needs and promoting a greater understanding of assets, their useful life, their asset conditions, and carrying forward, we'll add all of our new subdivisions and all of our new infrastructure, both above ground and underground. Chad's been with us for 6 months, and his first task was to complete a strategic asset management policy, which he has done for us tonight, which has a deadline of July the 1st. The town currently has just over $62 million invested in capital assets. And Chad's position will link all of those assets to the GIS, as well as maintaining them going forward. The work that Chad has accomplished with staff in the last 6 months has been very impressive, and he has put together a GIS Asset Management 101 session for you tonight, which he will go through, and then he will explain the asset management policy that we have to adopt. And we'll ask that you keep your questions till the end of Chad's presentation, if that's okay.
Perfect. So it's been a busy 6 months.
It has been busy. Thank you, Carrie, and Deputy Mayor Anderson. So if I had not had the opportunity to introduce myself, my name is Chad Smith. And as Carrie mentioned, I am the GIS Coordinator for the town since November 2018. This presentation will cover introduction to GIS, a brief overview of asset management, as well as the strategic asset management policy. So we'll begin with the GIS portion of the presentation. GIS can be viewed as a framework for the collection, management, analysis, and modeling of spatial data. It's a geographic discipline that is largely the study of techniques for analyzing geographic data, cartography, and spatial data structures, including GIS computer software. The acronym GIS can be split into two main definitions. The first being Geographic Information Systems, and this is the software component. This is where all of the data collection, storage, and manipulation takes place. The second is Geographic Information Science, and this is the theoretical component to GIS. And this is a study of performing geographic analysis, computer data structures, and techniques for working with spatial data. And when I say spatial data, that is information with a geographic component. So the best way to think about that is as an address point. The information component would be the civic address, and the spatial component would be the latitude and longitude of that property. Everyday consumer GIS use is web-based navigation, such as the one embedded on application side you may find on a smartphone. This type of GIS uses a collection of what are called data layers, such as a road network, building footprints, or points of interest. This GIS also has the ability to understand a location address as entered into a search function, and it may also be able to produce directions for transportation utilizing road network layers and perhaps even a live traffic layer. Professional GIS applications are used to accomplish tasks such as data analytics and modeling. These are performed with a desktop or mobile software application and have the tools to create spatial data, perform expenditure manipulation, and conduct in-depth analysis. This software allows the user to explore all data in their possession, whether it be stored on a hard drive or on the web. And unlike the consumer example we looked at prior, this type of GIS software requires extensive training and a modern workstation to utilize. It's designed more for technical use rather than its appearance and simplicity. Looking at the geographic information science side, it is the study of cartography, which is learning industry standards of map making, different components of maps, such as scales, bearings, and datums. It is the study of coordinate systems, how positions on the Earth are determined, the different coordinate systems and how they're utilized and calculated. Map projections, which is taking the three-dimensional surface of the Earth and flattening it into 2 dimensions for use on a map, and how to determine which projection is most appropriate for the task at hand due to the presence of distortion when flattening the Earth's surface. It's also the study of statistical and spatial analysis, which is how to mathematically analyze data sets and how those analyses are carried into the GIS software performed by a computer. And it is the study of GIS software, how it functions, accesses data, interprets data, and also online GIS software solutions. Looking at some applications of GIS in municipal government, here's an example of GIS use for utility and infrastructure management, specifically for water network modeling. In this image, GIS is not only maintaining the geographic location of the components, such as the distribution mains, the service lines, but it's also storing what is called attribute data, which can be thought of as a table associated with this data set. And that would store information such as the pipe diameter, material, and the installation date for that component. Data sets like this are utilized for infrastructure and asset management and can be quickly referenced by operating staff. Similar to other modern software, GIS can be configured to be entirely mobile. This allows data to be taken into the field where the information can be accessed on-site. Additionally, data can be edited or new information can be collected using a mobile device. Here's another example of GIS for land record management. This type of data set is used to maintain information associated with a property. The information would likely include property boundary lines, tax roll numbers, civic addresses, and ownership information. Data sets such as this can improve customer service by providing quick access to property owner information and serving as a visual reference to a customer's location to better help answer a question. By utilizing this type of data, workflows can also be simplified, such as, for example, when obtaining mailing lists. If a municipality needed to know the address for properties in a specific area or properties within proximity to a certain feature, they can be easily extracted from a GIS. Creating maps, web applications, and other deliverables also account for a large application of municipal GIS use. Data can be used to produce meaningful maps, which help to visualize large data sets and can simplify how complex information is communicated to better improve the user experience. Here's a screenshot from our current street map, which also includes a street index to improve the task of locating a street. On the digital side, web applications are excellent for communicating GIS information. They provide a custom environment which allows the user to safely explore data without having to be proficient with GIS technology. Users may find interacting with the GIS web application comfortable and familiar to what they may already use on a smartphone, such as the web-based navigation example we looked at earlier. Web applications also improve access to information by not limiting the data to a physical map or distribution location. That brings us to the asset management portion of the presentation. Asset management as defined by the International Organization for Standardization, is a coordinated activity of an organization to realize value from assets. It is a business approach to minimize the cost of asset ownership while maintaining an acceptable level of service. We use asset management to better manage our infrastructure and capital assets. This lets us achieve better service levels, which in turn equals a greater quality of life for residents. This allows for an increased understanding of asset condition and capability, and also permits us to see if an asset could be falling behind, as well as the costs associated with maintaining a level of service or reaching a new level of service when planning to accommodate growth. Asset management allows us to plan more effectively, financially and operationally, which promotes a sustainable community. By planning life cycle activities for an asset, such as resurfacing a road surface after X number of years, it improves the municipality's ability to project future costs for operation, which improves long-term financial planning. Asset management makes communities more resilient. It helps us plan for asset vulnerability, investigate methods to mitigate and adapt to those vulnerabilities, and by knowing asset operation replacement costs, contingency funding can be established. Last, asset management is a requirement under Ontario Regulation 588-17, which is Asset Management Planning for Municipal Infrastructure, passed in December 2017 under the Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act. It outlines specific asset management deadlines and what a municipality must have accomplished by that time. Here's a brief overview of the schedule that is presented by the regulation. By July 1st, 2019, municipalities must prepare and pass a strategic asset management policy, which is a high-level outline of the asset management process the municipality will follow. This will include any goals or strategies for implementing the process. By July 2021, an asset management plan must be completed. This is an in-depth analysis of core municipal infrastructure, and the plan will discuss items such as level of service, performance, life cycle activities, risk, and municipalities' assumptions regarding future changes in population or economic activity. By July 2023, the asset management plan must be updated to include all other municipal infrastructure assets, and that would be your equipment, land improvements, or vehicles, for example. In July 2024, another updated asset management plan includes level of service, proposed performance, and financial strategy to be deployed for the next 10 years. Municipalities must also provide explanations as to why they feel these levels are appropriate. Looking at the tools that help a municipality to have a successful asset management program, the most critical tool is asset management software. It helps municipalities to maintain a clean, centralized database of assets, which can be challenging since asset management involves all departments of an organization. Shelburne utilizes Public Sector Digest asset management software known as Citywide for its asset management needs. Citywide provides a comprehensive asset management solution. The main module of Citywide, which is shown here, is the asset inventory. The asset inventory allows the town to track each asset uniquely, include details such as the asset's classification, historical cost, estimated useful life, condition, and any other custom attributes which may be deemed beneficial to include. This is a preview of the columbarium asset logged in the Citywide software, which was purchased in 2018. Each asset has a highly customizable, unique information page, which is unfortunately too extensive to show on the slide. Citywide can also understand life cycle activities for an asset, such as regularly scheduled maintenance patterns and the impact they will have on the estimated useful life or condition of the asset they relate to. Here is an example of a road surface with, for the purposes of this presentation, a hypothetical maintenance activity scheduled to occur 10 years into the asset's life, which in response adds 5 years of useful life to the asset. The graph shows what the estimated useful life of the asset would have been should the life cycle activity had not occurred, as well as what the new estimated useful life of the asset is with the life cycle activity. You can see this road service asset now has an estimated replacement date of 2048 rather than 2043, which was the original. The software can also quickly produce visualizations and reports to summarize asset information. Two reports used frequently are the amortization and addition reports. The amortization report shows the closing amortization value for each asset category at year end. The addition report isolates newly acquired assets for a specific year. Both of these reports are essential when compiling year-end capital asset information. Here's an example of a more visual type report. This is the projected condition report, which shows the number of assets in each condition category that citywide will consider them to be in over a 25-year period. And in this visualization, red and orange would equal your more poor conditions, while blue toward green would be even better to very good conditions. The y-axis shows the number of assets, and the x-axis shows the year. The graph does not account for life cycle activities such as rehabilitation or reconstruction. It is only configured to consider asset age. Also, as new assets are acquired, the graph will start to look very different. As of 2019, the visualization shows there are approximately 2,200 assets in very good condition. As we supply greater information into the software, Citywide can estimate the probability of an asset's failure and the consequences its failure would have. This is a preview of how Citywide's risk matrix is laid out. It is based on the probability of failure and the consequence of failure, which is supplied by the user, which Citywide then uses to calculate a risk rating and assign the asset a place in the matrix. An asset which scores a low probability of failure with a low consequence of failure will be placed in the bottom left as seen here. As probability of failure increased, it would be placed further along the horizontal axis, and as the consequence of failure became more severe, it would be placed further along the vertical axis. Reports are also available to summarize this information for large asset groups, or even the entire inventory if needed. Citywide also offers a GIS module. The GIS module allows the user to understand where an asset is located in the town without having to rely solely on information entered into the details section for that asset in the inventory. Here is the asset inventory page for the road base of Prentice Road. In the bottom right quadrant of the screen, a small map preview shows where the asset is located since it has been linked to a road layer in the GIS module. Utilizing the GIS module streamlines locating an asset in Citywide when only having descriptive information to work with, such as trying to locate a hydrant that is at the corner of street A and B. It also provides greater confidence when working with an asset in inventory and assures the user they are looking at the intended piece of infrastructure. The GIS module also allows the user to understand how assets are related to each other spatially. For example, an asset failure which impacted infrastructure in its surrounding area could be visualized in this module as asset details were updated. The GIS module can also overlay the condition for assets to filter down to only view assets which meet a specific criteria. Here's an example of the estimated condition of road-based assets throughout the town solely based on their age as of 2019. Orange and red represent road-based segments which Citywide classifies as in poor condition, while segments shown in green and blue are in good condition. Gray road segments are those which have not yet been linked. This is due to either a subdivision having not yet been assumed or the asset's details are being modified in the inventory prior to GIS linking. Linking or modifying an asset is an ongoing, meticulous process due to the implications even a small change may have to balances in the general ledger, as well as the procedural requirements for asset management. This software suite is essential to effective asset management and provides us with the tools we need to stay on top of our inventory. Some other strategies municipalities using for asset management is establishing the Asset Management Committee, which includes the Treasurer, Director of Development and Operations, Deputy Treasurer, and GIS Coordinator. The committee conducts regularly scheduled meetings to discuss, plan, and evaluate asset management activities. The town also attends webinars and presentations for training and to do case studies to learn how other municipalities are administering their asset management programs. We are also attending conferences to ensure we remain current with asset management practices and that we are getting the most out of our software solutions. We are also taking advantage of the Amp It Up 2.0 program hosted by the Municipal Finance Officers Association of Ontario. In this program, the consultant reviews the town's asset management status and provides recommendations. The consultant then assists us in implementing those recommendations. This program is provided to us at no cost. And that brings us to the strategic asset management policy portion of the presentation. The recommendation, as written in the Treasurer's report, is to adopt the strategic asset management policy as presented. Beginning with the background and purpose, which is sections 2 and 3. The background and purpose of the policy is that it was written to guide the asset management activities of the town and to ensure we are within compliance
$600 that may be required for fundraising. I can say that there has been strong interest from partners in the community that are very interested in participating in this project, so it could very well be that the $600 may be zero, depending on other contributions from other partners. So I think that's certainly positive. But with that, any questions from member of council for Carol on the proposed community garden? Okay, all right. All right, so I'll read the motions. That be resolved that council receives report EDC 2019-1 as presented and circulated, and that council approves the development of the community garden at Fiddle Park. I get a mover on that, please. Councillor Bernardo and Councillor Buffett. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you, Carol. Okay, so that takes us to item number 4. It's a letter that I believe was enclosed in our materials from the Kinsman Club of Shelburne dated May 15, 2019, requesting to hold a beer garden at the July 1st, 2019 Canada Day event. Does anybody have any comments on that? No? Okay. So I'll read the motion. Be it resolved that council receives the letter from the Kinsman Club of Shelburne dated May 15, 2019, as presented and circulated, and that council approves the request to operate a beer garden during Canada Day festivities at Fiddle Park, July 1st, 2019, from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m., and that the minimum of $5 million liability insurance, naming the town of Shelburne as an additional insured, be obtained. Can I get a mover on that? Councillor Fegan, Councillor Whitman. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. The next item we have is bylaw 32-2019. Is ready for council's consideration, being bylaw to strike the rates of taxation and further provide for penalty and interest in default of payment thereof for the year of 2019. Any, please?
I didn't do a formal report, but I can give some verbal details. At budget time, our tax rate decrease was reported to be 1.62%. With the county's ratios shifting like they did in multi-res and farmland, our actual decrease ended up being 1.84%. The county and school boards also decreased their tax rates. So the overall tax rate total decrease is 2.44%.
So our taxes will be lower.
It depends what your assessment did. But I worked yours out, Walter. Do you want to know?
Never goes down. Never goes down. Everybody else's does, but mine goes up.
It's glad to see we have staff on the ball, right? Wow.
You give me yours, Steve.
Mine's always going up. It's all right. It's all right. Any questions for the treasurer office? Thank you for that. Thank you for the adding the comments to that. Could I get a mover on this, please? Councilor Bernardo, Councilor Fegan. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, that takes us to councilor motions. I know, Councilor Bernardo, you have a few. Okay. So the first one is be it resolved that council waives section 48 of the procedural bylaw to allow for a further revote on the application from the Legion for Saturday, June 15th request. Councilor Bernardo, you want to speak any further on this?
Yeah, when at our last meeting we had the request in from the Legion, we didn't have all the information that we should have had in regards to that, and since that time there, the Legion has provided information verbally that they had an event going further on in the evening, And that was the reason for the time of the request. We mistakenly thought that it was just for the street festival, which it was not for. So that's why I'm asking for council to allow for the procedural bylaws, that particular section to be voted on, that we waive it and allow for a further motion to come forward to correct the error that we made at the last council meeting due to lack of information.
Okay, this was seconded by Councillor Hall. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, as Walter said, there was a mistake made last time, and we just looked towards correcting it tonight.
Okay, perfect. So I'll read, I've already read the motion, I don't need to read it again. Any further discussion on this? All in favor? All right, it's carried, thank you. Sure. Right here. Okay. All right, I have a second motion to be read. This is moved by Councillor Wedner, seconded by Councillor Walter Bonato. It reads, be it resolved that the Legion be allowed to operate the beer garden in the parking lot from 11 a.m. to 2 a.m. Councillor Wedner, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, basically just because we are, or I guess we have more information now regarding the festivities that they will be taking place after the street festival sort of shuts down. I feel that, in order to support the businesses in town and make sure that there are activities for people within our town as well to attend, which would kind of be nice. We do hear that quite often there's nothing going on. I do believe that it would be nice to offer this for them in order to maybe generate a little bit more attendance.
Okay. This was seconded by Walter Bonato. Councillor Walter Bonato, any comments you want to add to that?
Yeah, in light of the information that was provided verbally, they have a ban, they have an activity after the street festival basically shuts down and further in the evening, and that was the intent for the later time factor. And they want to operate the beer garden. They've done that in the past when they've had these types of events going on at the hours that they do, so that's the reason for that motion.
All right, thank you. All right, any further discussion on this? All in favor? Carried, thank you. Okay, that takes us to number... All right, takes us to item number 8 on the agenda, communications. We have 7 items that are listed. Does any member of council wish to speak to Councillor Bonato?
I got several I want to speak to.
Okay.
I'll have to start with number 1 in regards to the cricket field. I know currently it has been a request that's come in. I don't know exactly how many, but I think some further investigation needs to be done there, not just, receive it as communication. There was a request put in. If there is enough interest in the community for that cricket field, then maybe that's something we need to look at in regards to where it can be located and what can be done. And they did state in their letter that at the end of a few cricket matches, the field is in poor condition, so a soccer field, for example, may not be the field that it could be on, but can be located somewhere within the town. I think it needs some further, not just ignore it and put it aside. So I'm not sure how and what we can do with it, whether staff, we can, ask for a report from staff and...
I'm not sure. I think maybe I can speak to our CEO on that. There was some discussion about maybe painted lines and what that would cost. Is that something that staff was going to come back with?
We would have to do an evaluation through the mayor, the deputy. We would need to do an evaluation similar to the request for the tennis court, similar to the request for enhanced recreational opportunities. As you mentioned, it's not an easy sport to just put on a soccer field or a baseball field. It would need a dedicated space, and we would have to review what park would be the most suitable for that, and then the costs associated with that in terms of any other services that they would require. Usually you would want washrooms associated with some sports because they just tend to need them. So if you'd like to direct us to review this, it won't be right away though. We would have to put it in the queue with everything else, and we'll get back to you on what part potentially would be the most, strategic to put a cricket field out.
The other part of it is not only direct you to review it, but I'd like to know, I mean, it's great to be on a couple of gentlemen write us a letter, but how much interest, how can we gauge it? Can we communicate with these gentlemen and find out how much interest there really is for it? Because there's no point in doing a field of dreams, for example, you know. We need to
That's pretty elaborate. Well, I can speak to that. I have spoken to one of the individuals that have submitted the request. The individual has indicated to me that there is a fair contingent of individuals that are interested in that they are going to, for example, let's say Brampton or other places to play and with the community continue to grow. At least it's their belief that the interest would be maintained and potentially even grow. So, but you know, I'll leave it to you as to what your request is of council and to staff.
And review. I'll look into it. I just don't want to see it drop. That's what I guess I'm going after. So I would like to see a staff report brought back.
Okay.
And if I can keep going, I think we also need to support the town of Mono's letter that was sent to us regarding the OMPF. I think that that's something, again, that, you know, it's the one major grant we get from the province, and for them to continually cut back, puts a lot more on our taxpayers. So I think we need to support that letter. I also think we need to support the town of Aurora's letter regarding the local planning area tribunal versus the OMB. I think the province is going backwards when they are moving back to the former way the OMB was, where decisions were made by people who had no regard for the community necessarily, compared to the local planning area tribunal, which had more regard in what they were to do with what the community interests were. So I'd like to support. I'd like to see us support that better as well, or that motion as well.
Okay, so I will just go back to item number 2, the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund. Your CEO has a comment.
Through the Deputy Mayor, as we all know, when some of the notifications in the past have been given to us, one of the scheduled reductions was an OMPF. So we've been anticipating that reduction going forward. Today's announcement by the Premier that 3 areas of service that were originally scheduled for significant reductions this year, and when I say scheduled, they were just announced recently, are now being reversed, and that predominantly is in social services, in ambulatory care, and in long-term care. So right now we will be projecting, as you go forward for our 2020 budget, a reduction in OMPF. Certainly as the council can support this, but whether or not it's consistent with the 4 government's approaches is only to be known, but certainly we'll take that under advisement and support that. But I just wanted you to be aware that we have been anticipating for years a scheduled reduction going forward.
What I've noted with the 4 government is the more voices that cry loud and cry long, it seems the squeaky wheel eventually does get heard at that level. So if we can participate as part of the squeaky wheel and cry loud and long towards them, we may be able to get them to at least hold it at some line rather than continue to reduce it.
Yeah, I mean, this has been one of the most sustainable funding strategies that we've had as municipalities, and to have it reduced is not going to be helpful, but certainly if it can be stabilized, would be great.
What I open.
Yes.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I just have a comment regarding number 4 letter from the town of Aurora regarding Bill 108. The town planner has prepared comments and will be submitting them on June 1st. There will be a subsequent staff report coming on June 10th.
So do you think we should wait till the staff report comes before doing it, or?
By all means, if you want to write a resolution of support, but comments are being submitted by the town planner.
Okay, I'll write a resolution support. Go ahead if you want beyond that.
Okay, anybody else have any? I'm going to have to wait until you submit, but in the interim, does anybody have any other questions on the items that are listed or comments? Okay. pressure, Walter. Everybody's just... Okay, so I'll read the first motion, moved by Councillor Walter Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Linda Buffett. Be it resolved that council directs staff to bring back a report on a dedicated cricket field. Any further discussion on this? All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Are you interested in using it in the first place, right? Perfect.
Okay, so I'll read the second motion. Moved by Councilor Linda Buffett, seconded by Councilor Walter Bernardo. Be it resolved that the town of Shelburne supports the letter and motion from the town of Mono dated May 2nd, 2019 to the Minister of Finance regarding the OMPF. Any further discussion on this? All in favor? That's carried. No, just as Councilor Bernardo was writing that, I do think his point is valid in reading the press release from the Ford government. It would seem to me that, as Councilor Bernardo pointed out, that it was because of the fact that there were a number of voices advocating for consideration or a reversal of the cuts that led to the decision that was made today. So I think it's timely that you're putting that forward, and we hope that we'll have the same result.
Sorry for the sloppy.
It's okay. As long as we can read it. So moved by Councilor Walter Bernardo, seconded by Councilor Linda Buffett. Be it resolved that the town of Shelburne support the letter dated May 15, 2019, and motion from the town of Aurora regarding Bill 108. Any further discussion? All in favor? It's carried. Thank you.
Now you go home.
Well, we have one more item. We have confirming bylaw 34-2019. Any, you want to speak? No? Just read it? All right, the motion's on the floor. Be it resolved that leave be given for the reading and enacting of bylaw 34-2019, being a bylaw to confirm certain proceedings of council of the corporation of the town of Shelburne for its regular council meeting held May 27, 2019. Any discussion on this? All in favor? Sorry, I apologize. Apologize, I'm getting ahead of myself. I was looking at the time and both it threw me off. Saying that we were at the end. Can I get a mover on this, please? Councillor Fegan and Councillor Hall, thank you very much. Any further discussion on this? All in favor? It's carried, thank you. And then the last item is adjournment. Be it resolved that we now adjourn the meeting at the call of the deputy mayor, I guess.
I'll move
Mover. Councillor Wenger, thank you so much. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you.